Sir Alric Vane had been called many things in his life. Hero of the Western Front, breaker of sieges, shield of the capital. But on the day he stood before the king's throne beneath banners heavy with dust and silence, he was called something else entirely. Liability. The word was never spoken aloud, yet it lingered in the air like smoke from a battlefield not fully extinguished. The campaign in the Grey Ridge Valley had not been a defeat in the traditional sense. No banners had fallen. No fortress had been overtaken. But Alric had chosen not to pursue a retreating orc battalion through a village caught in the crossfire. He had ordered his men to stand down rather than risk civilian bloodshed. In doing so, he allowed the orcs to withdraw intact. That restraint, praised by some as mercy, had been interpreted by others as weakness. And weakness, in a kingdom balanced on the edge of war, was a dangerous stain. The throne room felt colder than any mountain pass he had ridden through. Nobles lined the edges like carved statues, whispering behind jeweled hands. Generals avoided his gaze. At the far end, King Edric sat unmoving, his expression carved from stone and obligation. Alric knelt as protocol demanded, the metal of his armor ringing faintly against polished marble. He did not lower his head in shame, but neither did he lift it in defiance. "You disobeyed direct pursuit orders," the king said, voice carrying easily across the chamber. "I prevented civilian slaughter," Alric replied evenly. A murmur rippled through the court. The king's fingers tightened slightly around the armrest of his throne. "You allowed the Bloodfang Legion to regroup," Edric continued. "Their retreat emboldened their borders. Our scouts report increased patrols near Iron Hollow." Alric held steady. "Had we pressed the attack, the village of Hymir would be ash. And now," the king replied, "peace itself teeters." That was the heart of it. The orc clans had interpreted the withdrawal as calculated mercy or calculated insult. Tensions rose. Skirmishes multiplied. War drums whispered again in distant valleys. The court needed someone to carry blame for instability. Alric, with his inconvenient honor, had made himself a suitable vessel. The sentence came not with executioner's finality, but with something colder. To preserve stability, King Edric declared, "You will enter into binding marriage with Thrasha Bloodfang of the southern orc clans." The words struck harder than any blade. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Alric's breath stalled in his chest for only a fraction of a second before discipline returned. Marriage. To an orc warrior. Political union disguised as reconciliation. Punishment disguised as diplomacy. She is captain of her clan's vanguard, the king continued. The Bloodfangs demand assurance of our restraint. You will serve as that assurance. Assurance. Anchor. Symbol. Alric rose slowly from his kneel, helmet tucked beneath his arm. "You would bind a knight of this realm to an orc blade?" "I would bind two armies from slaughter," the king corrected. "Your mercy created this fracture. You will help seal it." There it was. Responsibility redefined. Alric had fought orcs since he was old enough to hold steel. He knew their war chants, their formations, the way they moved through forest like a living storm. He had faced Bloodfang warriors before, fierce, disciplined, relentless. Thrasha Bloodfang was not some ceremonial figure to be paraded at court. She was battle-hardened, dangerous, proud, and now she was to be his wife. The king's gaze softened only slightly. "This is not exile, Alric. It is service of a different kind." "Service." Alric bowed stiffly. "When is the ceremony?" "In 3 weeks." The court dismissed him without applause, without farewell. As he walked from the throne room, whispers followed like trailing shadows. Some pitied him. Others considered it fitting retribution. A few looked almost eager to witness the spectacle. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The capital bustled as it always had, unaware that its most decorated knight had just been bartered like coin across a negotiating table. He removed his gauntlet slowly, flexing fingers that had steadied blades through chaos. Marriage was not a battlefield. There were no clear lines, no visible enemy, only proximity. He did not know Thrasha Bloodfang personally, only her reputation. Bloodfang captains did not kneel easily. They did not soften for diplomacy. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until steel vows bound him to someone he had once met across a clash of blades. Alric exhaled slowly, staring toward the southern horizon where orc territories began beyond the hills. He had prevented bloodshed in a village. Now he would become the bridge between nations that did not trust one another. It was not death, but it was not freedom either. Thrasha Bloodfang was in the middle of training when the summons arrived. The southern plateau rang with the sharp clash of steel as she drove her practice blade into her opponent's guard, twisted, and sent him sprawling onto the red dust. Around them, Bloodfang warriors circled in disciplined silence, observing every movement with the sharp attention of soldiers who had survived too many campaigns to waste breath on praise. Thrasha did not offer her fallen opponent a hand up. He rose on his own. That was the Bloodfang way. Strength was respected. Dependence was not. The horn call from the war tower cut through the training yard, 3 short blasts. Council summons. Immediate. Thrasha wiped sweat and dust from her brow and handed off her practice blade without comment. The warriors parted for her as she strode toward the stone hall carved into the cliffside. Crimson banners bearing the Fang insignia snapped violently in the mountain wind, their edges frayed by seasons of war. Inside the hall, the air felt heavier. Her father, Chieftain Drogath Bloodfang, stood at the center rather than seated at his carved war throne. That alone signaled seriousness. Elders flanked him, armor worn but polished, expressions unreadable. "You sent for me," Thrasha said, voice steady. Drogath studied his daughter for a long moment. She stood tall, braids bound tight against her scalp, armor still dusted from sparring. There was no softness in her stance, no hesitation. "The human king has proposed terms," Drogath said finally. "Terms," she repeated, jaw tightening slightly. "We defeated their northern patrol last month. They have little leverage. They have more than you think." An elder stepped forward, holding a sealed parchment marked with the human royal crest. Thrasha did not take it. "They offer ceasefire along Grey Ridge," Drogath continued. "Shared trade passage through Iron Hollow. Recognition of Bloodfang territorial rights." That gave her pause. The Hollow had long been contested ground. Control of it meant winter survival without constant skirmish. "And the price?" she asked. Silence lingered just long enough to confirm her instincts. "You," Drogath said. The word fell heavier than any blade. "You will wed Sir Auric Vane." The name was not unfamiliar. She remembered him, tall, controlled, the human knight who had called retreat rather than burn a border village months ago. She had watched his forces withdraw from the ridge instead of pursuing her flank. She had expected arrogance. Instead, she had seen restraint. "Marriage," she said flatly. "Political union," an elder corrected. "A collar," she replied. Drogath's eyes flashed, but not with anger, calculation. "It prevents war. It makes me leverage. It makes you shield." Thrasha paced once across the stone floor, boots echoing sharply. "Bloodfang warriors do not kneel into treaties." "You will not kneel," Drogath said evenly. "You will stand." She stopped, turning toward him. "And if I refuse?" The hall grew colder. "Then war resumes," Drogath replied. "And the next campaign will not be skirmishes. It will be siege." Thrasha understood siege. Siege meant starvation. It meant children hidden in caves while warriors bled at gates. It meant endless winters fueled by hatred. "And this night?" she asked. "He is the one who stayed his blade at Hymir." "I know." The admission surprised even her. She had watched that moment from the ridge through smoke and chaos. His command had saved villagers on both sides of the conflict. It had also cost him ground. "Does he know?" she asked quietly. "He has been informed. So he is being punished as well." A faint rumble of approval passed through one of the elders at her observation. Drogath stepped closer. "You are not being traded," he said firmly. "You are being trusted." Trusted to do what? To survive their court. To represent Bloodfang's strength. To ensure they cannot twist this treaty without consequence. Thrash's fingers flexed at her sides. She had fought in 3 border campaigns. She had led ambushes through frozen forest. She had buried clan brothers under cairns of stone. Marriage had never been part of her war training. "And if the human court insults Bloodfang," she asked, "then you remind them why they fear us." A faint, dangerous smile touched her lips. "When is this ceremony?" "In 3 weeks. The same timeline given in the capital far to the north." Thrasha exhaled slowly, gaze drifting toward the open archway where wind howled across the plateau. "I will not soften," she said. "You must not," Drogath replied. "I will not kneel." "You will not." She nodded once. "Decision made. Then send word to the human king." Thrashes said. Bloodfang accepts. The elders bowed their heads in solemn agreement. Not celebration, not triumph. Necessity. As she exited the hall, the training yard fell silent at her presence. Warriors searched her expression for clues. She did not offer them any. In 3 weeks, she would stand beside a human knight in a hall full of eyes waiting for weakness. They believed they were forcing her into marriage. They did not yet understand. Bloodfang warriors did not break under pressure. They adapted. The cathedral bells rang without joy. They told because ceremony demanded sound, not because anyone expected celebration. The capital's central square had never hosted such a heavily guarded event. Human royal guards lined the marble steps in polished armor, spears grounded in perfect formation. Across from them stood a contingent of Bloodfang warriors in dark crimson plate, axes resting against broad shoulders, expressions carved from stone. Between them stretched a path of white stone leading into the cathedral, an aisle that felt less like a wedding procession and more like a negotiated ceasefire zone. Whispers rippled through the gathered crowd. Nobles in silk leaned close to murmur behind jeweled fans. Veterans folded scarred arms across their chests. Some citizens stared openly, curiosity battling unease. Others watched with visible resentment. An orc warrior as royal bride was not a story told in taverns with comfort. Inside the cathedral, colored lights spilled through stained glass depicting ancient human victories. Today, those images felt almost mocking. At the altar stood Sir Alric Vane, clad not in battlefield armor, but ceremonial plate etched with royal insignia. His sword hung at his side by tradition, though peace required it remain sheathed. His posture was straight, controlled. He did not fidget, but his jaw was set harder than steel. The massive doors at the cathedral's rear groaned open. Silence fell instantly. Thrasha Bloodfang entered without escort. She wore full Bloodfang battle armor, dark crimson and iron, polished but scarred. No veil, no silk, no attempt to soften her presence for human comfort. Her braids were bound with metal rings engraved with clan symbols. She did not lower her gaze as she walked the aisle. Every step echoed. Human nobles stiffened visibly at the sight of her tusks catching cathedral light. Orc warriors in attendance stood taller, pride evident in the way they refused to blink first. Halfway down the aisle, Thrash's amber eyes locked onto Alric's steel-gray ones. There was no affection there, only recognition. They had faced one another once across a battlefield ridge. Now they faced each other under vaulted stone. When she reached the altar, neither bowed. The High Archbishop cleared his throat nervously before beginning the rites. His voice trembled only once before regaining composure. Today we bind 2 warriors in covenant, he announced. Not in conquest, not in surrender, but in peace. A faint scoff from somewhere in the back was quickly silenced. Alric spoke first. I enter this union in service of the realm, he said clearly. I vow to uphold this treaty not as burden, but as shield. His voice carried evenly. No bitterness, no apology. Thrash's gaze did not waver. When it was her turn, she stepped closer without hesitation. I enter this bond in strength, she declared. I kneel to no crown, but I stand for my clan. The bluntness rippled through the cathedral like distant thunder. The archbishop hesitated only a fraction before continuing. Rings were brought forward, one forged from human silver, the other from Bloodfang iron. Symbolism crafted carefully by diplomats who hoped metal might succeed where swords had failed. Alric took the iron band first. His hand did not tremble as he slid it over her finger. Thrasha accepted the silver ring without comment and placed it firmly on his hand. Her grip lingered only long enough to ensure steadiness, not tenderness. By authority of crown and clan, the archbishop proclaimed, this union stands. No applause followed, only silence thick enough to feel. Then Chieftain Drogath struck the butt of his axe once against the cathedral floor. A single, sharp sound. King Edric rose slowly from his throne beside the altar and inclined his head, not deeply, but unmistakably. It was acknowledgement, not submission, not dominance. Acknowledgement. Alric and Thrasha turned together to face the gathered assembly. Side by side, not one step behind the other. The visual mattered. Outside, the bells continued to toll as the cathedral doors opened once more. Sunlight spilled across stone steps, illuminating the unlikely pair as they emerged into the square. Some faces softened in relief that no violence had erupted. Others hardened further. This was not a fairy tale union. It was a political blade sheathed carefully between two nations. As they descended the steps, Thrasha spoke under her breath without looking at him. If your court believes I will soften for them, they are mistaken. Auric's gaze remained forward. If my court believes I will control you, they are mistaken. A faint pause. Good, she replied. They walked toward the awaiting royal carriage together, not touching, not speaking further. Behind them, human and orc warriors held position without drawing steel. The wedding of enemies had concluded without blood. For now. But as the carriage doors closed and the square slowly began to disperse, both Auric and Thrasha understood a deeper truth. The ceremony had been the easy part. Living together would be war of a different kind. The royal wing assigned to them overlooked the capital's eastern gardens, where marble fountains spilled water in careful symmetry and trimmed hedges formed patterns meant to impress foreign dignitaries. It was beautiful in the way only places untouched by war could be. Calculated, polished, controlled. Thrasha stood at the tall window on their first evening as husband and wife, arms crossed over crimson armor she had refused to remove. Below, courtiers drifted like colorful birds along stone paths. None looked up. Behind her, servants finished arranging separate wardrobes along opposite walls of the chamber. Two beds had been merged into one larger frame at the center of the room, as tradition required. Thrasha glanced at it once and then away. Auric dismissed the servants with a short nod. When the doors closed, silence settled heavily between them for the first time without witnesses. You may remove the armor, he said finally. No one will attack you in your sleep. That confidence is either naive, she replied without turning, or dangerous. He exhaled slowly. The palace is guarded. So was Greyridge. That silenced him. She finally unfastened her gauntlets, setting them carefully on a nearby table. Your nobles stare as if I might tear down their walls, she said. They're adjusting, he answered. They're judging. That too. She turned then, amber eyes sharp. Do they blame you? Yes. For marrying me? For letting your forces retreat months ago. A faint flicker of understanding passed across her face. You lost status. I lost favor. And now I am useful again. The honesty surprised her. Days passed with rigid routine. Formal dinners. Strategic meetings. Appearances designed to reassure a restless public. At every banquet, nobles spoke around Thrasha rather than to her. Some offered stiff courtesy. Others made veiled comments about barbarian customs disguised as polite curiosity. During one such dinner, a lord leaned too close to Auric and muttered, You wear a leash well. Thrasha heard it. Her goblet froze halfway to her lips. Auric's hand tightened around his fork, but he did not react outwardly. Careful, Lord Heron, he replied calmly. You mistake alliance for ownership. Heron offered a thin smile. We shall see which it proves to be. Later, in the privacy of their chamber, tension finally cracked. You should have struck him, Thrasha said bluntly, and prove his point. Auric countered. He insulted you. He wanted reaction, and you gave him none. Exactly. She studied him carefully, as if reassessing a battlefield opponent. You fight differently here, she observed. There are no clear lines in court, he replied. Only traps. She paced once across the chamber, restless energy barely contained. Your capital smells of perfume and suspicion. He almost smiled. That is accurate. Over the following week, rumors began to spread that the marriage was failing, that the orc bride refused to adapt, that the knight had grown distant. Some claimed she intimidated the household staff. Others whispered that Auric regretted his punishment. One morning, Thrasha entered the training yard behind the palace to find a group of human knights sparring. The moment they noticed her, movement slowed. Continue, she said. They hesitated. I did not come to watch hesitation. A younger knight stepped forward reluctantly. With respect, my lady. Do not soften your strikes, she interrupted. The spar began cautiously. It did not remain that way. Within moments, Thrasha disarmed the young knight cleanly and stepped back without triumph. You fight expecting apology, she told him. Do not. By afternoon, word had spread that the orc bride had bested 3 palace knights in succession. The whispers changed tone. That evening, Auric entered their chamber to find her finally seated without armor, long braids unbound for the first time. The sight startled him more than any battlefield charge. "You're adapting," he said quietly. "I am surviving," she corrected. He nodded. A pause lingered. "They will try to divide us," she said after a moment. "They already are. Will you allow it?" He met her gaze steadily. "No." For the first time, something shifted, not trust yet, not warmth, but alignment. Outside their chamber walls, factions maneuvered quietly. Hardliners within the court saw opportunity in discomfort. Orc envoys reported tension back to Bloodfang territory. Inside, two warriors shared space neither had chosen freely, but neither had stepped back either. Their house was divided by culture, by history, by expectation. Yet beneath the friction, something steadier began forming. Not affection, not yet, but respect earned in silence rather than demanded in pride. And in a palace where weakness was hunted like prey, that foundation mattered more than either of them realized. The royal banquet hall glittered with gold and glass the night the first real crack appeared. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over silk-draped tables heavy with roasted meats, sugared fruits, and wine poured too freely. Music floated softly from the gallery above, meant to smooth tension and disguise the careful watching that filled the room. Nobles had gathered not merely to dine, but to observe. The marriage was still new. The orc bride still controversial. Every movement she made felt recorded. Thrasha wore formal attire at the king's insistence. Dark crimson fabric reinforced subtly with leather beneath. She had refused delicate ornamentation. The only jewelry she allowed was a Bloodfang iron clasp at her throat. Alric stood beside her, expression composed, hand resting near the hilt of his ceremonial sword. "You are being measured," he murmured quietly. "They will not like the results," she replied. The evening began without incident. Polite conversation, careful diplomacy. Thrasha answered questions about Bloodfang territory with restrained precision. She neither bragged nor apologized. The more composed she remained, the more unsettled certain nobles became. It happened between courses. A servant approached Thrasha from behind, carrying a silver tray. Nothing unusual, until Alric noticed the servant's grip. Too tight, too rigid. The tray tilted slightly. Not wine. Steel. The hidden dagger flashed beneath candlelight just as the servant lunged. Alric moved before thought caught up. His chair crashed backward as he intercepted the strike mid-swing, blade drawn in one smooth motion. The dagger scraped against his forearm guard instead of Thrasha's exposed neck. Gasps erupted across the hall. Thrasha did not freeze. She pivoted sharply, sweeping the attacker's legs from beneath him with controlled force. The servant, no, assassin, hit the marble floor hard. Before he could recover, her boot pinned his wrist. The dagger clattered across polished stone. Guards rushed forward, but the damage was already done. Blood stained the white marble. Alric glanced down, expecting to see Thrasha wounded, but the crimson soaking into her sleeve was his. The assassin had nicked his arm during the deflection. "Stand down." Alric ordered the guards sharply as they raised spears. The assassin struggled briefly before going still. His face bore no clan markings. His clothing was common servant attire, but the dagger, human-forged. Not orc. The hall dissolved into chaos. "Who allowed this?" a noble shouted. "An orc retaliation," another accused. Thrasha's eyes flashed dangerously at that. "If I wished retaliation," she said coldly, voice cutting through panic, "you would not see it coming with a tray." Silence followed. King Edric rose from his seat, fury simmering beneath controlled composure. "Seize him," he commanded. The assassin was dragged away, struggling but silent. Only when the hall began to clear did Thrasha turn fully toward Alric. "You are bleeding," she said. "It's nothing," he replied. "It is not nothing." In their chamber later, she cleaned the wound herself, movements efficient but unexpectedly careful. "You reacted without hesitation," she said quietly. "So did you." Her fingers paused briefly as she tied the bandage. "They meant to kill me," she stated. "Yes." "To break the treaty." "Yes." "And they chose a human blade to do it." Alric met her gaze steadily. "They want this marriage to fail," he said. "If you had died tonight, Bloodfang would march. And if you had died," she replied, "your kingdom would blame us." Understanding settled heavily between them. This had not been random. It had been strategic. Someone within the capital wanted blood, wanted outrage. They will interrogate him, Alric said. And if he names no one, she asked. Then suspicion spreads. Thrasha leaned back slightly, studying him with new intensity. You protected me, she said. Yes. Even after being forced into this union. His answer came without pause, especially because of it. The admission lingered. Outside their chamber, rumors ignited like dry grass. Some claimed the assassin was planted by Orc loyalists testing weakness. Others whispered that court hardliners staged the attack to prove the marriage foolish. By morning, the narrative had fractured into factions. But one truth remained clear. Alric had shielded Thrasha publicly, and she had defended him just as fiercely. At the next council session, when subtle jabs resurfaced, Alric did not allow them to pass unanswered. My wife was targeted inside our own hall, he stated coldly. That is not Orc aggression. That is internal betrayal. The word betrayal struck deep. Across the chamber, Thrasha stood tall, not as foreign bride, but as equal presence. Trust had not grown from affection. It had grown from shared danger. Blood had been spilled, not in war, but in defense. And from that moment forward, whatever this marriage had begun as, it was no longer merely obligation. It was alliance. The palace healer insisted Alric remain confined for 2 days after the banquet attack, though the wound had been shallow. Steel that grazes once may return deeper, the healer muttered darkly while rewrapping the bandage. Alric endured the attention with visible impatience. He had survived far worse on open battlefields without such ceremony. But this was different. The attack had not been chaos of war. It had been calculation. Thrasha remained in the chamber more often than court expected. At first, it was strategy. Her presence discouraged further attempts. But as the hours passed, silence between them shifted from tension into something more reflective. On the second evening, rain struck the tall windows in steady rhythm. The capital's noise softened under the storm, leaving only the crackle of hearthfire between them. You hesitated in Grey Ridge, she said suddenly, seated across from him with her armor partially unfastened. He looked up from the map he had been studying. You were there. I was on the ridge when your cavalry pulled back. He nodded once. I saw the village. And chose it over advantage. Yes. Why? It was not accusation. It was curiosity sharpened by lived experience. Alric leaned back slightly. Because my father once burned a village to secure victory. She stilled. He was praised for it. Alric continued. Promoted. Decorated. But I saw the aftermath. The memory flickered across his expression like shadow crossing steel. I decided I would not measure success by ash. Thrasha absorbed that in silence. My clan measures survival differently, she said after a moment. We fight because we have been cornered before, pushed from valleys, driven into rock and winter. He studied her carefully. You've lost territory. Yes. Recently, her jaw tightened slightly. 5 winters ago, a coalition of human barons pushed into the southern pass under pretense of reclaiming land. We buried 40 warriors, 12 children. The admission hung heavy between them. Your kingdom did not intervene, he asked quietly. Your kingdom called it independent action. Alric's gaze dropped briefly. Politics. Convenient separation of blame. She rose and moved toward the hearth, extending her hands toward warmth. I do not enjoy being paraded before your nobles, she said. But I understand why my father agreed. You're stronger here than they expected. That unsettles them. It unsettles everyone. A faint, dry breath escaped her that might have been humor. You are not what I expected either, she said. What did you expect? Arrogance. And instead, restraint. The word lingered between them. Outside, thunder rolled low across the city. They will try again, she said. Yes. From within. Most likely. She turned toward him fully then, her expression less guarded than before. In my clan, she said slowly, partnership is not softness. It is shield. He held her gaze steadily. Then we stand as shield, he replied. Silence followed, but it was not empty. Later that night, Alric found sleep elusive. The rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp and cool. He stepped onto the small balcony adjoining their chamber and found Thrasha already there, watching the city lights below. You do not rest, he observed. I do not trust quiet, she replied. He moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that shared breath mingled in the cold air. You carry your clan on your shoulders, he said. So do you. A pause. If this fails, she said quietly, I return to war. If this fails, he echoed, so do I. Neither wanted that. He looked at her then, not as political symbol, not as obligation, but as someone forged by similar fires under different skies. You are not my punishment, he said quietly. Her eyes shifted to him. And you are not mine, she replied. The words did not spark immediate warmth. They built foundation. Inside the palace walls, factions maneuvered carefully. Investigations into the assassin revealed quiet ties to a noble house long critical of the treaty. Whispers of conspiracy began surfacing in corridors thick with perfume and politics. But inside their chamber, something else was forming. Understanding. Not romance. Not yet. But the beginning of something far more dangerous to those who wanted division. Trust born not from convenience, but from scars revealed without armor. The letter arrived sealed in crimson wax stamped with the Bloodfang insignia. It was delivered not by royal courier, but by an orc rider who refused to dismount within palace walls. He waited in the courtyard like a storm contained. Armor dusted from hard travel, gaze fixed forward as though the marble beneath his boots offended him. Thrasha broke the seal without ceremony. She read the message once. Then again. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. It's from your father, Auric said quietly. Yes. And she folded the parchment carefully. The clan demands I return. The words settled heavy between them. Demand, he repeated. Rumors have reached Bloodfang territory, she said. They claim I am being diminished, softened by court life, that I stand beside humans more than my own. Auric exhaled slowly. They question your loyalty. They question the appearance of it. He understood the distinction. In war and politics alike, perception could wound deeper than truth. What does your father want? He asked. To see me return publicly, to prove I have not been swallowed by this place. And if you do not, Red Tusk remnants and other hardliners will claim Bloodfang leadership grows weak. My father's authority could fracture. Auric studied her carefully. She stood straight, controlled, but tension lived beneath her stillness. Then you should go, he said. Her gaze snapped to him. Not anger, not accusation, but surprise. You would not object? She asked. Objecting would make it look like imprisonment, he replied evenly. Which feeds the rumor. Silence lingered. And you? She pressed. I remain, he said, until you return. A flicker of something unreadable passed across her expression. You would let them question you, she said. They already do. She turned away slightly, pacing once across the chamber. If I leave, she said slowly, your court will claim the marriage failed. If you stay against clan summons, he countered, they will claim you chose humans over Bloodfang. There is no path without consequence. No, he agreed. There isn't. Later that afternoon, King Edric summoned them both. The clan summons you, the king asked, steepling his fingers. Yes, Thrasha answered. And you intend to answer? Yes. The king's gaze shifted to Auric. And you? I support her return, Auric said. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Publicly, the king pressed. Publicly, Auric confirmed. The decision unsettled several nobles present. If she departs, Lord Heron interjected smoothly, the treaty weakens. If she refuses, Auric replied, voice cool, the treaty fractures. King Edric studied him carefully. You are certain? Yes, your majesty. After council dismissed, the courtyard gathered quickly. Word of Thrasha's departure spread faster than gossip ever had. Human nobles watched from balconies. Orc envoys assembled in disciplined silence near the gates. Thrasha mounted her warhorse without assistance. You will be watched closely, she said quietly to Auric before departure. I'm accustomed to that. And if they press you, I will not bend. A faint pause. You surprise me again, she said. I intend to keep doing so. She almost smiled, but did not. The gates opened. As Bloodfang riders formed around her, whispers erupted among the watching court. She returns to her own, someone muttered. Perhaps she never belonged here, another suggested. Auric stepped forward before the rumors could gain momentum. My wife rides to defend her clan's honor, he announced clearly to the assembled nobles. And she does so with my full support. The declaration echoed across stone. It was not possession. It was partnership. Thrasha met his gaze one final time before turning her horse toward the southern road. The procession moved swiftly, crimson banners catching wind. As the gates closed behind them, the palace atmosphere shifted immediately. Some faces reflected relief, others calculation. Alric felt the weight of solitude settle over his shoulders, but it was different now. Not punishment. Choice. Days passed. Reports filtered back through scouts and envoys. Thrasea stood before Bloodfang warriors in full armor, recounting the assassination attempt, the council negotiations, the shared defense of the capital. She did not soften the truth. She did not embellish it either. She made one thing clear. She had not been diminished. She had chosen. In the palace, pressure mounted quietly around Alric. Your wife may not return, Lord Heron suggested one evening with feigned sympathy. She will, Alric replied calmly. And if she does not, then I ride south. The certainty unsettled more than argument ever could. A week later, crimson banners appeared on the northern horizon once more. Thrasea returned at the head of a disciplined Bloodfang escort, not in retreat, not in shame, but in strength. As she dismounted before the palace gates, human and orc alike watched carefully. You faced them, Alric said quietly when she approached. They listened, she replied. And they stand behind the treaty. Relief flickered across his expression before he could mask it. The clan's ultimatum had not broken them. It had tested them. And both had stood firm, not by clinging to each other, but by allowing space without surrender. For the first time since the forced marriage began, something deeper than strategy anchored their bond. Not obligation, not necessity, respect chosen under pressure. And that, more than vows spoken under cathedral glass, was what truly strengthened their union. The uprising began at dusk, when shadows were long enough to hide intent. It started in the merchant quarter, a brawl between human laborers and orc traders over a spilled crate that turned violent too quickly to be coincidence. By the time palace guards received word, flames had already begun climbing the side of a grain warehouse near the eastern gate. Alric was in the war chamber when the first report arrived. Clashes in the lower district, the captain of the guard announced. Orc and human factions both involved. Random? Alric asked. No, sir. Coordinated. He didn't need more explanation. Extremists. From both sides. Thrasea entered moments later, already armored, expression sharp as drawn steel. Red tusk remnants, she said. And your court's hardliners. Working together, Alric finished. An unholy alliance forged in shared hatred of peace. Another horn sounded, this one closer. Smoke began rising visibly from the eastern quarter beyond the palace walls. They are targeting mixed districts, Thrasea observed, where trade has begun to stabilize. They want chaos to prove coexistence impossible, Alric said. Outside, shouting echoed through narrow streets. Torches moved in frantic patterns. Civilians ran. Open the armory, Alric ordered. Mixed patrols only. No separate formations. The captain hesitated only a fraction before saluting. Within minutes, palace gates opened, not for retreat, but intervention. Alric and Thrasea rode out side by side. The capital looked nothing like the polished marble facade of royal banquets now. Market stalls were overturned, banners torn down. A group of masked men hurled stones toward an orc-owned smithy while shouting slogans about pure blood. Across the street, an orc youth swung a hammer wildly at human storefront windows. Stop! Alric's voice thundered over the chaos. Few listened. A flaming torch struck the roof of a grain cart, igniting dry straw instantly. Thrasea dismounted before the horse had fully stopped moving. She seized the torch thrower by the collar and slammed him into a wall with brutal efficiency. You burn your own city? She snarled. The man spat at her. Behind them, Alric intercepted a red tusk fighter attempting to cut down a human guard. Steel rang sharply in the smoke-filled street. You shame your clan, Alric said coldly as he forced the attacker back. I defend it, the orc shouted. By killing traitors? The blade clash continued. Elsewhere, human extremists dragged a Bloodfang merchant from his stall. Thrasea crossed the distance in 3 strides, knocking one attacker unconscious with the flat of her axe and driving the others back without lethal strikes. Enough, she roared in Orcish. Her voice carried differently than Alric's, command born of clan authority rather than royal decree. Slowly, pockets of violence began to falter under coordinated counteraction. Palace guards, human and orc combined, formed protective lines around civilians rather than chasing agitators. Fires were smothered. torches kicked aside. But the true instigators were not the loudest fighters. They were watching from rooftops. Alric spotted one drawing a bow toward Thrash's back. He moved without thinking, raising his shield just as the arrow struck, splintering wood inches from her shoulder. She turned instantly, following his line of sight. "Rooftop," he shouted. They moved together, up narrow stairways, across stone balconies slick with smoke and ash. At the top, they found two masked figures attempting to flee. One wore human boots. The other bore red tusk markings beneath his cloak. Proof. This was not random outrage. It was partnership in destruction. The fight was short and brutal. When it ended, both agitators lay bound and bleeding but alive. Below, the fires were dying. Shouts softened into murmurs. By midnight, the capital stood shaken, but not shattered. In the central square, citizens gathered in exhausted silence. Some wept. Some glared. Many simply stared at the unlikely sight of their knight and their orc warriors standing side by side, armor scorched, blades sheathed. King Edric arrived shortly after, face grim but steady. "Order is restored," the captain reported. "For now," Alric replied. Thrasha stepped forward before the gathered crowd. "Those who burned tonight did not fight for honor," she declared loudly. "They fought for fear." Her gaze swept across human and orc alike. "If you let fear decide your future," she continued, "you give them victory." Alric joined her at the front. "We fought together tonight," he said. "Not because of treaty, not because of obligation, because this city belongs to all who live in it." Silence stretched. Then, slowly, a human shopkeeper stepped forward and nodded toward a bloodfang merchant whose stall had been damaged. "We rebuild at dawn," the shopkeeper said. It was small, but it mattered. Later, back within palace walls, exhaustion finally caught up to them. Thrasha removed her helmet, dark hair damp with sweat. "They almost succeeded," she said quietly. "Yes. They nearly turned us against each other. But they didn't." She looked at him then, not as ally, not as political counterpart, but as partner forged in flame. "You shielded me again," she said. "So did you," he replied. The uprising had not destroyed the capital. It had revealed its fracture lines. And in standing together publicly, fighting not for pride, but for people, they had shifted something deeper than policy. For the first time, love was not a distant impossibility. It was something quietly forming in the space between shared battles. Not spoken, not yet, but undeniable. The capital still smelled faintly of smoke days after the uprising. Burned timber had been cleared, shattered windows replaced, and mixed patrols now walked the streets with deliberate visibility. Order had returned, but beneath it lingered something fragile. Not fear. Not exactly. Uncertainty. The arrest from the rooftop revealed what many suspected. Human hardliners and Red Tusk loyalists had coordinated the unrest. Letters seized from both factions detailed plans to escalate violence gradually until retaliation became unavoidable. If Thrasha had struck first, if Alric had answered rage with rage, if even one civilian death had been blamed publicly on the other side, the treaty would have collapsed overnight. Instead, they had stood together, and that unity had made them dangerous. 3 mornings after the uprising, King Edric summoned Alric privately. "You have done what few believed possible," the king said, pacing before the tall windows of his study. "Public sentiment shifts in your favor. The court cannot ignore it." "That was not the goal," Alric replied. "It rarely is," the king said dryly. "Nevertheless, the effect stands." He paused, then faced Alric fully. "I am prepared to restore your former command," Edric continued. "Full rank. Authority over the western battalions." Alric did not react immediately. "And my marriage?" he asked. The king's expression hardened slightly. "You may petition for annulment," he said. "Given recent events, it would not be contested. The treaty can stand without personal union." The words landed heavier than expected. "You believe it unnecessary now," Alric said. "I believe the symbol has served its purpose," Edric replied. "And you deserve restoration." Deserve. Alric left the chamber with more weight than when he had entered. That afternoon, a Bloodfang envoy arrived with separate news. Thrasha was summoned to council chambers lined not with marble, but stone and iron banners carried into the capital for formal gathering. Her father stood at the head of the delegation. "You have proven strength," Drogath said without preamble. "Your name carries differently now." She waited. Bloodfang elders are prepared to name you war chief upon my stepping down, he continued. Murmurs rippled through the clan representatives. Return home, Drogath finished. Lead your people directly. The offer was not threat. It was honor. War chief meant ultimate authority over clan campaigns and defense. It meant shaping Bloodfang destiny beyond diplomatic marriage. It meant legacy. And the treaty? Thrasha asked. It stands, Drogath said. With or without your presence in this palace. The implication lingered clearly. She could return, lead, stand unquestioned among her own. That night, the palace felt unusually quiet. Alric entered their chamber to find Thrasha seated at the long table, armor removed, hair unbound once more. They've offered you command, he said. They've offered you restoration, she replied. They studied each other carefully. Will you accept, he asked. Will you? Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but raw. Before this, Alric said slowly, I would have taken it without hesitation. And now I understand what would be lost. She held his gaze. In my clan, she said quietly, leadership means standing where it matters most. And where is that? He asked. She did not answer immediately. I thought it was Bloodfang territory, she said at last. But perhaps it is wherever peace is most fragile. He exhaled softly. I was offered freedom, he admitted. From this marriage. Her expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. And? She asked evenly. I did not ask for it. The truth hung between them. You could return south, he said. Be war chief. Led without question. And you could reclaim command, she replied. Yes. A long pause followed. Forced marriage built this, she said quietly. Choice defines what comes next. He stepped closer, not touching, but nearer than before. I choose this, he said. Not duty, not treaty. This. Her breath steadied. You understand what that means? She asked. Yes. It means neither of us leads alone. Good, he said softly. Because for the first time, something warmer than alliance existed between them. Not born from politics, not from necessity, but from shared battles fought willingly. In the days that followed, both sent formal replies. Alric declined restoration without his wife beside him. Thrasha declined war chief appointment, for now. Shock rippled through court and clan alike. But so did something else. Respect. The forced marriage had begun as punishment and leverage. Now it stood as choice. And in choosing each other publicly, not as symbol, but as partners, they shifted the foundation beneath two kingdoms. War had once defined their bond. Now, something far stronger did. Spring came slowly to the capital, as if even the seasons were cautious about change. Where fires had scorched merchant stalls months before, new beams now stood. Mixed patrols had become ordinary enough that children no longer paused to stare at green skin beside polished steel. Trade caravans moved steadily through Iron Hollow under shared banners. The treaty, once brittle as thin ice, had settled into something sturdier, not unbreakable, but real. In the Royal Council chamber, final ratification of expanded trade rights was signed beneath both the human crest and the Bloodfang insignia. No wedding spectacle accompanied it this time. No dramatic pronouncements. Just ink, iron seals, and steady hands. Alric stood beside Thrasha as the documents were pressed flat. You could have had command, a noble murmured to him quietly. Instead, you stand as diplomat. Alric's expression did not shift. I stand where I choose. After council adjourned, the courtyard filled with both human and orc representatives. It was not celebration in the traditional sense, but there was ease in the air that had once been impossible. Later that evening, when formalities finally ended, Alric and Thrasha returned to their chamber overlooking the eastern gardens. The air was warm, quiet, no horns, no smoke, no whispers of assassination, just stillness. Thrasha removed her gauntlets slowly and set them aside. She did not replace them immediately with armor. You once told me this marriage was punishment, she said. It was, he replied. And now? He considered carefully. Now it feels like foundation. She stepped closer, studying him with the same intensity she once reserved for battlefield opponents. You surprised me, she admitted. You've said that before. I expected resentment. I expected resistance. A faint smile touched her lips, genuine this time, not edged in challenge. We were both correct, she said. He nodded. They had fought, quietly, fiercely, strategically, against forces neither could see fully. Court conspirators, clan hardliners, fear disguised as loyalty, pride masquerading as strength. But somewhere between assassination attempts, rooftop battles, and shared silence beneath stormlit windows, something had shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, gradually. Trust had become habit, respect had become instinct, and affection, unexpected, unplanned, had taken root in ground once scorched by history. You chose to stay, she said softly. So did you. A pause lingered, not heavy, not uncertain, just real. For the first time, Tharasha said, voice quieter than he had ever heard it. This does not feel forced. He stepped closer. It isn't. Outside, the city hummed gently with evening life. Somewhere in the lower district, a human baker and an orc smith argued good-naturedly over the price of flour. Guards from both sides shared watch rotations without drawn steel. It was not perfection. There would always be those who preferred fire to compromise. But the foundation now had something it lacked before. Choice. Alric reached for her hand, not as public gesture, not as performance, but as partner. She did not hesitate. We stand together, he said. Not because we must, she replied, but because we want to. The words settled between them like oath renewed, stronger than cathedral vows spoken under political pressure. Below, twin banners stirred in the warm wind, human crest and Bloodfang's sigil flying side by side, not merged into sameness, not one above the other. Equal. The knight who had once been punished for mercy now understood its true cost and its reward. The orc warrior who had been offered up as leverage had become something far more powerful. They had been forced to marry. They had not been forced to love. That choice had been theirs. And in a world long ruled by war drums and sharpened steel, that quiet, deliberate love proved stronger than either. Stronger than pride. Stronger than fear. Stronger than war itself.